I'm Taylor, 31, and on the morning of my grandfather's will reading, I thought I was just another forgotten member of the family heading to a house full of fake condolences. My parents and siblings had already made it clear that I'd walk away with nothing, and I believed them, until a ragged man stepped into the road and stopped my car. He handed me a crumpled envelope with my name on it, written in my grandfather's hand. Inside was a letter warning me not to trust my family, and a key that didn't open the mansion, but a downtown deposit box. What I found there wasn't just his real will, it was proof of every lie they had told. That discovery turned me from background noise into the one person who could ruin them. While they fought inside the mansion over forged papers, I walked into court with the truth that could strip them of everything. And when it was read aloud, silence crushed the room that once laughed at me. What followed wasn't just an inheritance fight, it was the unraveling of a family who thought they could bury me along with him. Instead, they buried themselves. The road stretched ahead in a gray ribbon of asphalt, cutting through a forest that had grown far too tall and close over the years, as though the trees themselves wanted to keep me from reaching my destination. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, fingers pale from the grip, the air in the car heavy with silence broken only by the steady thrum of the engine. I wasn't just driving to a house. I was driving into a family storm I had spent most of my life dodging. My grandfather's mansion stood as the last monument of his life, and today was the will reading, the moment when all the masks my family wore would finally fall away. For years, I had been the quiet one, my parents' overlooked daughter, the sister who didn't claw for attention, the relative who didn't orbit around the glittering sun of my grandfather's wealth. They thought that made me small, someone who would stand off to the side, nod politely, and leave empty-handed. Maybe I even let them think it because fighting for scraps in a family like mine was like feeding yourself to wolves. But when the letter arrived, summoning us to the mansion, I knew the gathering would not be about grief or memories. It would be about power, money, and the pieces of my grandfather's empire. And yet, none of that prepared me for the moment when a ragged man stepped into the road. I slammed the brakes, the car jerking forward with a screech, my chest snapping against the seatbelt. The man didn't flinch. He stood there, framed by the forest shadows, his clothes worn and frayed, his hair streaked with gray, his face sunburned from too many days outside. His eyes cut straight into me, sharp and unsettling, the kind of eyes that spoke of truths no one wanted to hear. I rolled down the window halfway, unsure if I should yell at him to move or ask if he was hurt. Before I could say a word, his voice broke the silence, low, trembling at first, then firm like steel. "If you enter that house," he said, "you'll regret it forever." I froze. His words struck deeper than any threat could. There was no menace in his tone, only a heavy certainty that chilled me. My instinct was to brush it off, to tell myself he was another drifter muttering nonsense, but something in the way he looked at me stopped me from dismissing him outright. I leaned closer, keeping my voice steady even as my pulse hammered. "Do I know you?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. His hands trembled as he pulled something from his coat pocket. It was a crumpled envelope, creased and smudged with dirt, but my name was written across it in bold strokes. My name, not a title, not a careless nickname. My full name, in handwriting I knew as well as my own. My grandfather's. My throat tightened as I took the envelope. The man stepped back, his eyes never leaving mine. "Don't trust them," he whispered. "Your parents, your siblings. They aren't what you think." Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the trees as quickly as he had come, swallowed by the dark green wall. I sat there, the envelope trembling in my hands. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. My mind spun with questions. Why would my grandfather give this to a stranger? Why not send it directly to me? And why did it feel heavier than any letter should? Finally, with a deep breath, I tore it open. The paper inside was aged but intact. My grandfather's handwriting sprawled across the page, sharp and deliberate. "My dear granddaughter, if you are reading this, it means I have failed to shield you from the hunger of those closest to me. They have turned my final days into a battlefield, poisoning every hour with their schemes. They want what I built, not because they love it, but because they cannot live without it. You must not believe what they tell you today. The papers they present will not be mine. They are forged, forced, and false. I leave you this warning because you are the only one I could trust to see through them. Enclosed is a key. It does not open any door in the mansion. Instead, it belongs to a safety deposit box downtown. Inside, you will find my true will and the evidence of their treachery. Do not hesitate, and do not show your hand until the moment arrives. The future of everything I built rests in your hands now. Your grandfather. The letter slipped in my grip as the weight of it pressed down on me. My heart hammered in my ears, every nerve alive with disbelief. My grandfather had always been the anchor of our family, the man who commanded rooms without raising his voice, whose approval my parents chased like shadows. For him to write this, to warn me directly, meant everything I thought I knew about today was already a lie. I looked inside the envelope again and saw the key. Small, cold, metallic, engraved with a number that burned itself into my memory. My stomach twisted as I realized what I had to do. I couldn't drive to that mansion. Not yet. Not when everything I'd been told about the will reading was a performance scripted by the very people he told me not to trust. I turned the car around. The forest swallowed the road behind me, the mansion waiting in the opposite direction like a trap I had narrowly avoided. The drive downtown felt endless, each red light a test of my patience, each honking horn a reminder of how surreal this had become. The city, with its glass towers and endless noise, felt alien compared to the silence of the forest road. But the key in my pocket grounded me, pressing against my thigh with every movement, urging me forward. The bank's lobby smelled of polished wood and faint disinfectant, the kind of place designed to feel safe and sterile. I approached the clerk with the key in hand, my voice firm though my hands were clammy. She barely looked at me before directing me to a private room. Moments later, the safety deposit box was placed on the table in front of me, heavy, locked, waiting. My fingers fumbled as I turned the key, but when the lid lifted, the breath left my body. Inside lay a stack of documents bound together, and on top of them, a sealed flash drive. The will was there, unmistakably authentic with his signature, but it wasn't just a will, it was a weapon. It named me as the sole heir, cutting out every single member of my family with clear, undeniable language. Attached to it were files, recordings of conversations, written testimonies, even medical notes, showing how they had pressured him in his weakest moments to sign over control. And then there was the flash drive, labeled only with a single word, proof. I plugged it into the bank's provided device, the screen flickering before my grandfather's face appeared. His eyes looked older, his voice more fragile, but his presence was still undeniable. "If you are watching this," he began, "it means the lies have already spread. I want you to know the truth directly from me. They tried to make me betray myself, to erase you from everything. I refused. They pushed harder. I refused again. I leave this to you not because you are the youngest, not because you are the quietest, but because you are the only one who never asked me for anything. That is why you will carry everything forward. They cannot be trusted, and they will not stop. Protect yourself, and do not let them win." The video ended, leaving me in silence, so thick it felt like a weight pressing against my chest. My hands shook as I closed the lid of the box, locking away the documents and drive once more, but the truth had already burned itself into me. By the time I left the bank, the sun had shifted lower in the sky. My phone buzzed with missed calls and messages from my parents and siblings, their words dripping with impatience and thinly veiled control. "Where are you?" "The lawyer's waiting." "You're late." "Don't embarrass us." I didn't respond. I drove not to the mansion, but to my grandfather's lawyer's office. The look on his face when I placed the documents on his desk was unforgettable. His eyes widened, his lips parted, and then he exhaled slowly, as though releasing a secret he had been forced to keep. He reviewed the papers, played the video, and nodded, solemn and deliberate. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "But we cannot reveal it yet." Timing will be everything. So I waited. Hours passed while the mansion echoed with the chaos of my relatives tearing into each other over forged documents, their greed louder than their grief. They thought I was absent, sulking, irrelevant. They believed they had already secured what they wanted. And when the day of the court hearing came, when they sat smug and arrogant with their counterfeit papers, I walked in with the truth held firmly in my hands. The courtroom hushed as the lawyer read the authentic will aloud. Line by line, their laughter evaporated. My parents' faces drained of color, my siblings' eyes darted in panic, every ounce of their arrogance collapsing under the weight of undeniable proof. And as silence filled the room, I stood there not as the forgotten daughter, but as the heir my grandfather had chosen. They thought I would regret missing the mansion. Instead, I watched them drown in the silence of their own defeat. The silence in the courtroom had been heavy, but the noise that followed was deafening. As soon as the session adjourned, my family surged toward the lawyer's desk like a pack of animals realizing their prey had slipped away. Voices overlapped, accusations, denials, frantic questions. My parents barked at him about legality, my siblings shouted about fraud, but the lawyer didn't flinch. His hands stayed firm on the folder containing the true will, his calmness a stark contrast to their unraveling. I stood a few feet back, letting their chaos feed on itself. When my mother finally turned to me, her eyes cut like knives. "What did you do?" she demanded. Her voice carried a pitch I had known my whole life, the sound of control slipping from her grasp. My father tried to mask his fury under a low growl. "This isn't over. You think you can walk in here with some papers and overturn everything? You don't understand how this works." I met his glare evenly. "I understand more than you think." My siblings were less restrained. My brother pointed a finger at me like he was ready to strike. "You planned this. You've been hiding things. You think you deserve all of it? You were never even around. You didn't earn any of it." The words rolled off me like stones. I didn't need to shout back. The proof had already been spoken aloud by the lawyer, witnessed by the court. Their panic was evidence enough. Still, I knew this wasn't finished. People like them didn't retreat, they regrouped. Outside the courthouse, the air was cool, the city buzzing with its usual indifference. Reporters had caught wind of the will reading and swarmed the steps. Cameras flashed, microphones pressed forward, voices called my name alongside my parents'. They demanded statements, explanations, anything that would feed tomorrow's headlines. My parents tried to seize the stage, spinning the story into confusion, claiming misunderstandings and legal disputes. I didn't answer a single question. I walked past them, flanked by the lawyer, the folder held tight in his grip. My silence wasn't weakness, it was control. We slipped into his office, once more, the blinds drawn, the noise of the city muffled behind thick glass. He laid the documents across the table again, his eyes studying me carefully. "They will fight this in every way possible. You've seen what they're capable of. Expect forged claims, accusations against you, maybe even personal attacks. They won't let go easily." I nodded. "I'm ready." But readiness was a lie. Deep inside, my pulse was unsteady, my thoughts racing ahead to battles I couldn't fully predict. Still, I wasn't about to show hesitation. My grandfather hadn't trusted me with his final legacy, so I could shrink back now. The next days unfolded like a storm. My parents and siblings held press conferences, smiling for cameras while painting me as the manipulator. They said I preyed on my grandfather when he was weak, that I tricked him into rewriting his will in secret. They filed motions in court, contesting authenticity, demanding delays. Every news channel carried their narrative, and I became the shadow in their story. The quiet granddaughter suddenly turned villain. Yet I had something they didn't proof. The video testimony from my grandfather remained untouched, undeniable, waiting for its moment to strike again. I could have released it immediately, crushed their claims with one broadcast. But the lawyer advised patience. "They're digging their own graves," he said. "Every lie they tell now will collapse the moment the recording is shown. Let them burn their credibility first." So I waited, watching them smear my name, letting their arrogance dig deeper. It wasn't easy. Friends reached out with cautious messages, unsure of what to believe. Strangers hurled insults online, calling me greedy, heartless, unworthy. The mansion became the center of a circus, reporters staking out the gates, distant relatives suddenly reappearing to take sides. And in the middle of it all, I found myself drawn back to the house I hadn't entered. It loomed at the edge of the city, set behind tall iron gates and sprawling gardens. I drove past it one evening, the sky bruised with dusk, the mansion glowing with lights from every window. Through the gates, I could see shadows moving inside, my family hosting gatherings, putting on shows of unity, pretending the place was still theirs. Seeing them inside my grandfather's home while I stood outside the gate ignited something sharper than anger. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about reclaiming what was stolen, not from me, but from him. The lawyer and I met again, planning each step. He showed me the timeline, the hearings to come, the evidence that would be presented. He was careful, meticulous, the kind of man who never revealed more than necessary. But I noticed how he studied me between sentences, as if weighing whether I was strong enough to carry the storm that was coming. "You realize," he said one night as papers covered the table between us, "once this is done, your family will never forgive you. They won't see you as the rightful heir. They'll see you as the one who ended their world. You need to be certain you can live with that." I didn't hesitate. I already lived most of my life without them. The hearings moved forward, each one a battlefield of accusations. My parents brought in doctors claiming my grandfather was not of sound mind when he signed the real will. My siblings testified with rehearsed lines about his supposed confusion, trying to paint a picture of decline. Their lawyers hammered at every angle, but with each attempt, the documents held firm. The witnesses my grandfather had chosen to support the will were credible, their accounts consistent. The cracks in my family's performance widened with every session. Then came the night I received another envelope. This time, it wasn't handed to me on a forest road by a stranger. It was slid under my apartment door, the paper clean, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a single sheet with no greeting, no signature, only a sentence written in dark ink. "They know about the deposit box. Watch your back." The words chilled me. It meant someone inside the circle had broken, or someone outside had been watching closely. Either way, the secrecy around the will was unraveling. I immediately contacted the lawyer, showing him the note. He frowned, scanning it with practiced suspicion. "They're desperate," he said. "If they know about the box, they'll try to claim tampering. We'll secure duplicates of everything in multiple locations. But you need to be careful. Desperation makes people reckless." From that night on, the tension shifted. It wasn't just about legal battles anymore, it was about safety. I noticed unfamiliar cars parked near my building. Anonymous calls came late at night, silence on the other end before the line disconnected. Once, I returned to my car to find the tires slashed. My family never confronted me directly, but their shadow pressed closer, reminding me that blood ties didn't prevent blood threats. Through it all, I held to my grandfather's video like a lifeline. Watching it again in private, hearing his voice, steadied me. He hadn't just left me an inheritance, he had armed me with the truth. And I promised myself that when the final hearing came, I would unleash it at the exact moment their lies reached their peak. The third hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. By then, weeks of legal battles had stripped away my family's carefully polished facade. Their public smiles had hardened into grimaces, their united front fractured into open hostility. Reporters no longer described them as confident heirs, but as desperate opportunists scrambling to hold on to something that was already slipping through their fingers. Every headline was sharper than the last. Every interview revealed another crack. Still, they refused to yield. My parents arrived at court flanked by high-priced attorneys, their eyes narrowed, their voices sharpened with the rehearsed cadence of people who believed repetition could disguise the truth. My siblings clung to their seats, exhaustion painted on their faces, but arrogance still clinging to their words. The courtroom was crowded, not just with lawyers and clerks, but with observers who had followed the story like a show they couldn't look away from. I sat quietly beside the lawyer, my posture straight, my hands resting calmly on the table. Inside, my heart beat steady, not with fear, but with clarity. Today would not drag into another delay. Today would be the end. Their side opened first, parading another doctor to claim my grandfather had been mentally unfit, then presenting forged notes as supposed evidence. Each attempt was weaker than the last, the contradictions piling up until even the judge's patience grew thin. By the time their lawyers finished, the air in the courtroom was heavy with doubt, not toward me, but toward them. The judge turned to our table. "Do you have a response?" The lawyer stood. His voice was measured, steady, carrying across the room without strain. "Yes, Your Honor. We have one final piece of evidence to submit. Direct testimony from the deceased, recorded and verified, left explicitly for this proceeding." The room shifted. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. My parents stiffened, their faces drained of confidence. My brother whispered frantically to his attorney. My sister shook her head in disbelief. The screen was wheeled into the center, the flash drive inserted, and the video began to play. My grandfather appeared, seated in his study, his voice fragile but firm. His words carried no ambiguity, no hesitation. He named me as the heir, outlined the manipulations they had attempted, and denounced their efforts with clarity that cut through every lie they had tried to build. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, every ear tuned to his voice, every eye locked on his face. When the video ended, no one moved. Then the judge leaned forward, her expression resolute. "The will is valid. The evidence is indisputable. The estate, businesses, and assets will be transferred to the sole heir named, his granddaughter." The gavel struck, final and undeniable. For a moment, the only sound was the echo of wood against wood. Then the eruption began. My parents jumped to their feet, shouting over each other, their voices breaking with rage. My siblings shouted accusations at me, their words desperate, incoherent. Reporters swarmed toward the front, cameras flashing, microphones raised. The bailiff stepped in, restoring order with firm commands. Through it all, I remained seated, my breath steady, my expression calm. It was finished. Outside the courthouse, the storm exploded. Cameras flashed so intensely it felt like daylight. Questions fired from every direction. How does it feel to win everything? Do you have a statement for your parents? Will you take control immediately? I didn't give them the soundbite they wanted. I simply said, "The truth always wins," and walked past them, leaving their chaos behind. But the story wasn't over until I confronted it at the root. That evening, I returned to the mansion. The gates were open, reporters gone, the drive eerily quiet. The house loomed ahead, the same place I had once avoided, the same place I had driven past in silence. Now it was mine, not through their approval, not through inheritance games, but through the words of the man who had built it all. I stepped inside. The air carried the faint smell of polished wood and dust. The rooms were empty, stripped of the noise of my family's gatherings. I walked through the halls slowly, each step an echo, my eyes scanning the portraits, the furniture, the memories frozen in place. For the first time, I wasn't a visitor here. I belonged. But as I reached the study, the room where my grandfather had recorded his testimony, I froze. Someone was there. The ragged man from the road sat in the corner, waiting. His clothes were the same, his eyes sharp as ever, his presence unsettling yet calm. He didn't rise when I entered. He simply looked at me, as though he had been waiting for this moment all along. "You," I whispered. "Who are you?" He stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "Someone who owed your grandfather a debt. He trusted me with that letter because he knew your family would do anything to bury the truth. My job was simple, get it to you before they could trap you in that house." I studied him carefully, my pulse quick but steady. "Why me? Why not go straight to the lawyer?" His gaze didn't waver. "Because your grandfather didn't trust anyone but you. Not the lawyer, not his so-called friends, not even me beyond delivering the letter. He wanted you to make the choice, to decide whether to follow his warning or walk into their game. His words settled heavy in the room. I realized then that my grandfather had never planned for a clean fight. He had known exactly how far they would go, how desperate they would become. And he had trusted me not just to inherit his empire, but to protect it. The man stepped closer, his expression softening. Now that it's done, my debt is paid. Be careful with what you've inherited. Money can be stolen, businesses can be taken apart, but trust, once it's gone, it never comes back. Without waiting for my response, he turned and left the study, his footsteps fading into the empty halls until the front door closed behind him. I stood alone in the room, the weight of everything pressing down, but it wasn't fear, it was clarity. The war was over, the lies stripped bare, the empire secure. My family's arrogance had collapsed under the truth, and their betrayal had become their undoing. In the days that followed, the transfer began. The mansion became mine officially, the businesses shifted under my control, the accounts cleared of dispute. Reporters tried to stir the story into a scandal of greed, but the documents, the video, and the court's decision left no room for doubt. My parents disappeared from the spotlight, their influence shattered. My siblings scattered, bitter and humiliated, each too consumed by anger to face me again. I didn't seek reconciliation. There was nothing left to repair. Blood may have tied us, but loyalty had never been part of it. My path forward was my own, unchained from their shadows.